Hi everyone. So I'm Sandra Patel-Stewart, CEO and founder of Transition Partners. Thank you all for attending our next virtual Taking in Time in Tech webinar. So due to the numbers and also the feedback we received from the last session, we've decided to run this session today as more of an interactive roundtable kind of format. So feel free for those who, if you don't want to have your cameras on, turn them off. If you want to be on mute, be on mute. But if you want to speak up and speak out, do speak out. Just whatever you're all comfortable with, but we're hoping that it'll be a much more interactive and value-add session. So following on from the feedback we received last time, we've based this session today around reflections on leadership within tech, learned and unlearned behaviours, also looking at imposter syndrome, and also the impact of social media, impact of mental health from social media activities. I really hope that this session will help you all moving forward. You will get to take some takeaway tools from this session and some tips to help you in the future. So on that note, I'd like to introduce you to our facilitators. So we've got the wonderful and lovely Chris Fawcett, who is a life and master coach, and the amazing Richard Kenny, who is IT director at Tech Buyer. Richard is also a trustee of a local mental health charity called Claro Mental Health, based in Harrogate. And I really hope you all enjoy the evening. As I said before, feel free to unmute and show your face if you want. If not, feel free to use the chat box. And I now hand over to Chris and Rich.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Oh.
All right. You dive in, Chris, mate. You fine, you start.
I was just going to say, yeah, welcome everyone. And as Sandra said, if you want to speak up, please just jump in and ask any questions as we go. Obviously, it would be lovely to see you, but there's no set criteria for having your camera on. If you want your camera on, fantastic. If you don't, not a problem. But yeah, it would be lovely to see who we're talking to today. As we've obviously got quite an intimate group, ask any questions, you know, and if we can help you, if we can coach you, if we can guide you through anything through this session today, then obviously we will do that, and we'd love to do that as well. So I think, yeah, hand it over to Rich.
Cool. So what we're going to kick off on is concepts of leadership. So last time we talked a lot about the empathetic leader and what that means for organizations, how you either develop into an empathetic leader or sort of behaviors you can follow that probably improve your general leadership in specifically tech, but in life in general. So Chris gave us some great ideas around affirmations for self-confidence. We went through sort of unlearning negative behaviors, things like that. So first off, I just wanted to kind of talk to you about the theory and the concept of the great leader, the great man, the impeccable woman, and what that kind of does from a mental health point of view and how that impacts you. So I think generally what we find is you have this idea that somebody is born a Richard Branson, or is born a Steve Jobs, or is born a, I don't know, whoever your favorite leader is. I suppose it could be, Martin Johnson for rugby or something like that. And all the research points towards the fact that this is a developmental process, and that we don't actually deal with someone coming out of the womb as the fully formed article, but it's built over experience, it's built over negative and positive actions and outcomes. And what people probably don't realize is how damaging the perception that this person is born as opposed to made has on your self-reflection, your self-confidence, and how you feel. The reason we're talking about this to start with is because it ties into everything that we're talking with through the rest of today. So we talk about imposter syndrome, we talk about social media's impact on your mental health. This first piece, this born leader thing, is a massive part of that, because it comes down to what is made versus what is created. And there's a couple of people in the world who have incredible traits and incredible attributes and innate charisma, but these are the 1 in a million. The problem is social media reflects that, so this 1 in a million becomes 1 in everything you see. Every image you see is impeccable, every speech is given is edited, and you never really get to see the true person. And I thought it was just good for us to start off as a idea on leadership and as an idea on building better leaders, that we understand that they are built and they are trained, and it's something that you can improve and that these people themselves have had to work hard to improve as well. And I think that's critically important for us. So this all comes down to the self-confidence piece, the self-image, the self-belief piece that ties in so much with mental health. This constant feeling of inadequacy and not being good enough. And it is manifested in this leadership piece, because these are the people we see, we look up to, and we think are particularly unique people, but they're not. They're people just like us, and they're people that make everyday decisions and try and make good ones. So Chris is going to talk to you a little bit about how you can build up that self-confidence and that belief, and how we can train in these behaviours.
Yeah, cheers, Rich. So I think from my aspect, obviously not necessarily being in the tech industry, but obviously working with various people within it, it really comes down to who you want to be as a person. And I know that sounds a little bit vague, but we generally set off on a bit of a journey. Well, we've got some more people. We set off on a bit of a journey through life, and we don't necessarily know who we want to become. And we talk about goals a lot, and I talk about goals a lot with clients, but one of the higher level questions I talk to clients about is, who do you want to become and what do you want to be known for? And that then determines what you actually do in life, because if you want to become a certain something, you will have definitely different actions that you need to take than if you wanted to become an Olympic sprinter. So it's very, very specific in creating this persona of who you are and who you want to use as a role model. And as Rich said there, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. Everyone, and as Rich said, everyone that's become a leader in the world, whether it's in business, whether it's in tech, whether it's in humanitarian things, philanthropy, they've all started somewhere. And a lot of the people that you look back at have actually come from absolutely nothing. They've had nothing, they've been nothing, they've had struggling families, they've had no food, they've had no money, and they've had to learn to become more resourceful in life. And there's a lot of people out there with a lot of resources that end up in rehab, and there's a lot of people out there that without a great deal who end up doing very, very well in life because they have to strive to become more. And I think, talking about the self-belief, it's really understanding who you want to become and then believing that you can do that. And that comes from within. That belief can't be given to you. It can't be injected into you. It can't be taken by a tablet or anything like that. It comes from within, and this passion and this hunger to become a better person. And that helps us become better leaders and ultimately become a better director, manager, leader in our industry. It's very, very, I see it as very, very linked between personal and business. And ultimately, if you become a better person, you become a better leader, and you become a better business owner or manager or leader in the industry. So yeah, I think that's my little take on that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with leadership is that, and this is where it's really critical that you understand the concept of leadership, that leadership is a social construct built around followship. So followers are the ones that provide power, impetus, and direction to leaders. So leadership is not something that exists in a vacuum. You cannot be a leader without followers. It's as simple as that. Now, there's this negative connotation around the term followers, in that basically they're passive and they're going kind of on the journey. And sometimes you can feel like that. Sometimes you're a follower who is just going with the flow. What you have to understand is that as a follower, you shape what you expect from your leaders. So every single decision your leader makes has to resonate with the power you give them. And that's exactly what Chris is talking about when he's talking about self-belief and who you want to be. It's not just who you want to be, it's how you want to be treated and how you want those people that treat you that way to grow and develop as well. So this concept of leadership is a two-way street. And we talked a lot about this last time when we talked about empathetic leadership, about understanding people, ethical leadership, the characteristics we expect from a commander. And it's fascinating because I was reading stuff recently from President Nixon, who's obviously one of the worst people on the planet. And his concept on leadership was, and it was interesting, this was pre-Watergate, and he was saying that leaders are not the people you'd want your children to be. They do not have the attributes that you would want if your child, unless you wanted them to be a leader. And that was the concept of leadership in the 70s, that these people were political and power-driven animals who make decisions for the greater good without considering how that impacts their people. And there's been this change in the paradigm of leadership where we expect our leaders to be flawless. We expect them to be ethical, intelligent, driven, perfect at all times, and they're not. And that is something we're only just kind of coming to realize, that we can drive how we want our leaders to behave, and that we can set the expectation that they will live up to. And that's a massive part for us as leaders, but also for us as followers of the greater whole, that we are driving what happens to us. This idea of fellowship is crucial in understanding how people interact with each other. And this kind of leads us on to our next topic, which was around imposter syndrome. And the reason why I talk about this is because generally the concept of imposter syndrome is really prevalent in tech. They reckon that up to like 80% of people at some point will have some feeling of inadequacy around their position of power, their level of capability, their confidence will be impactfully affected in a negative way by outside perceptions that has nothing to do with them as people. So we want to talk about the building of leaders and how they're created and how they're trained and how they develop, and how that impacts you in business or in life. And the recent situation we found ourselves in with COVID has had a massive effect on our leaders that, as followers, you may or may not know, and as leaders yourself, you may or may not have felt. And they were saying that in tech, up to, I think it was 80 or 85% of C-level executives have had crises of confidence around not being good enough for their position. So prior to COVID, they had experience, they had training, they had knowledge, they had backup, they had everything. We hit this external shock that no one has any experience of previously. And we find that 85% of the people we look up to have panicked or have had a crisis of confidence to the point where they don't feel good enough. And I guarantee if you spoke to someone like a Richard Branson, whose airline has just failed, this would probably be the first time their confidence has been properly shook. And that there has to be a level of understanding from us to those people in power that they're all learning this and they're making this up as they go. And that the empathetic leadership piece goes both ways. There must be an empathetic follower piece as well that says, how do we support our people to make the right decisions for us? And I'm really keen to get yours and especially Chris's input on this, on what he thinks in regards to this issue around self-confidence and imposter syndrome and how it affects people that are very, honestly, in tech, generally they're technically brilliant, but they struggle to validate that internally. And I'd be keen to hear that from people, both on this conversation and especially Chris and Sandra as well.
Yeah, if anyone's got any questions or any comments, if you want to pop them in the comments box there. Sorry,
or just unmute.
Yeah, or just jump in. The self-belief and imposter syndrome is really something interesting, and you hear it a lot in the coaching world, and there's a lot of people overcoming certain things. And I was coaching somebody today, a mindset coach, on her belief, on her mindset, on the things that she helps other people with. And we all need some assistance at some point. And it's really, really interesting, because when you come up against a scenario that we've never come up against, i.e. coronavirus, which no one's ever really had to deal with before, it's a new world, it's new territory. And what Rich just mentioned as well is the followers and leaders scenario. We don't all have to be leaders in a company or an industry. We need to be leaders within our own lives and lead ourselves by example and influence ourselves to be the best we can. But from a following perspective, companies wouldn't work if it was full of 50 leaders. So it's quite interesting when we talk about followers and leaders that it's not a bad thing being a follower. It's actually a really, really good thing, because your values and views on life may be different to what the leader has. You know, you may want to spend more time with your family, and you may want to do this, and following and earning a nice steady salary may work for you. So I think understanding that principle as well, and not putting too much pressure on people to be a leader, is quite key, because it's not for everyone. But as long as we lead within ourselves and be the best that we can be, then the world will go around really, really well. I think that's quite key. So there's just a question just popped in there, and so with imposter syndrome, reading into it and realizing its actual thing was the first step for me. So if you're on, Alice, would you mind sharing, if you want to, just sharing what is it specifically about it being feeling like an imposter that you
Hello.
Hey.
I know for me, I just kind of like always think, oh, I shouldn't be here, or there's like this niggling feeling in the back of your mind that I'm not meant to be here. This isn't a situation that's for me. And then you don't really know what it is. And then reading into imposter syndrome and actually oh my God, this is an actual thing, and I have that, and I feel like that to some extent, and that I go into a room and I feel like this isn't the right situation for me, and it isn't just me, and I'm not alone in feeling like that. I guess the next step is how to like overcome that, and I guess finding your own self-worth is one of those, like, and understanding that you are important and that you do deserve to be in that room. It's probably the next step that I need to take.
Do you know what, that's really interesting. Just being completely cards on the table, I had the same problem about 5 years ago. Like, I was, senior member of a big organization. I'd run £1 million projects, well, £1 billion projects all over the world, and I still constantly felt that I'd only got here by luck, and that someday I was going to get found out, and that someday someone was going to turn around and go, do you know what, you're not technical enough for this. How have you managed to wangle your way into this? And every day I used to worry coming to work that I'd get found out for no reason. Like, I was really good at my job, and had everything I needed. But every meeting I went into, I used to sit there and go, is this the day where someone turns around and go, wait a minute, like, who are you? Why are you here? And that went on for me for almost a year when I was working in London. And like, for a year I felt completely worthless and not good enough to kind of be in the room with the people I was dealing with. And it was only when I went on a night out with a ridiculously smart lady I was working with that she said she felt the exact same way. It blew my mind, because she was the smartest woman I've ever met. She was incredibly smart, incredibly driven. I used to look up to her and just think, one day I might be someone like you. And she told me that every single day she was worried that I'd realised she wasn't as smart as I thought she was, or that she wasn't as capable of leading the teams. Or in a lot of cases, and especially the gender thing's a massive part in this, she was worried that one day someone would think that her opinion was less valid because she was female. And that for me blew my mind, because I was sitting there thinking, you're the only person that I've ever come across where I've just thought, I believe everything you say, whether that's a negative thing or not. She was hyper intelligent. These are sort of people who like, MBAs at Harvard in like her early 20s. Do you know what I mean? Like, she'd worked internationally with the British government. She'd been a diplomat. She was incredible, and she was telling me that she didn't feel good enough. And it made me think, how many other people like this? And I did the same as you. I started to look into it and then realized that it has nothing to do with what you do and who you are.
Exactly. You're not alone.
And like you said, the interesting thing is the female thing. You said about 90%. Now that's true, and the problem is for guys, it's almost identical. They just won't admit it.
Just honest.
Well, I think it's the CV thing, isn't it? You're like, you work in recruitment, don't you, Alice? Is that right? So there's this thing that guys will have a punt at jobs they're not qualified for, whereas girls feel they need to meet every role in the spec. Is that right?
Yeah.
You guys are smart.
Definitely. I know I've done that in the past, 100%.
Yeah.
Just not good enough for this role. I haven't got everything, so I can't possibly be good enough. And I think it's that mindset that I think affects you. And it's exactly that we're talking about in tech. And I think the problem with tech is it moves so quickly that there's no way you can know everything. Because even if you know everything today, you don't know everything tomorrow. And I think the biggest problem in technology is you always feel like an imposter, because you always feel like you're out of date. You always feel like a relic. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could know everything there is to know about the most recent technologies that we use today, and then tomorrow a new one comes out and I have to start all over again. So what I learned to do was accept the fact that what I'm good at is having a learning mindset, and that I'm really good at learning to learn. And that meant that no matter what comes out, I can adapt to that. And that's my skill set. That's my superpower, is that I'm really good at reading. Like, I am really, really good at reading, and I'm really good at understanding. And I learned how to do that. And then what that meant is that any situation I came into, as long as I could research it, I'd probably be all right. And I've never felt a doubt since then.
No, I think it's definitely one of those things, and I think it's becoming more relevant, and it's more of a hot topic, as you'd say, like, as things, and I think it's going to be one of those things that we'll find out lots more about. And I just need to do a bit of reading into it now.
It's really interesting. Like I said, the thing for me was finding out this research they've done recently on the C-level people. So the people who should be the most confident, capable people in the business community, and 2/3, 3/4 of them are just going, I don't know how I got here now. Like, just because of coronavirus. Before the middle of March, these people were saying that they knew everything there is to know about their businesses, and 2 days later they're wondering whether or not they got there by luck. And that for me is fascinating, because I bet everybody at some point feels like that.
100%.
Definitely. It interests me, actually. I find it quite exciting, because at the other side of getting over the imposter syndrome is massive growth. if you can. I see it as a huge challenge for the leaders to actually then grow and develop, because they've got really good in an environment that is almost a fake environment. I think that, and you know, and the environment that's been bred, and now it's like, okay, so you've been picked up and taken to a new environment, and let's see how you fare. Now, unfortunately, some people won't fare that well, and others will, and that shows the true leader, because they can become more resourceful and they can grow and develop. Not saying it will be easy, but it will certainly be a challenge, and it will help people become, again, a better version of themselves at the other side of the pain. But coming back to you, Alice, in terms of these feelings, is, you know, it comes back down to the internal dialogue that you're saying to yourself ultimately, and the things that we let manifest within our mind. And you know, if you do it 2 or 3 times and you say, you know, I'm not good enough, why should I be here? The brain will give you those answers. So it's asking ourselves more empowering questions around that. So how can I feel better about this meeting, instead of why am I in this meeting? Or how can I become how can I think differently, or how can I act differently when I walk in? And you'll start getting yourself different answers. But definitely coaching yourself through that process, through questioning, would be really good place to start.
Cool, thank you.
No problem.
I also find framing the situation changes your whole perception. So like I used to have this thing where if I wasn't feeling confident, I'd go to the place where I feel strong. So if I was in a meeting and it was one of the ones I was really unsure about, I'd make someone come to my desk, because I felt like I had a better control over the situation. So whenever I was feeling a little bit out of my depth, I'd be thinking, if we sit in neutral territory, everyone feels good. Whereas if we go to that other person's home, they're in control. And that is part of what we're talking about with the empathetic leadership piece, is understanding that having, as a leader or a boss, having someone come to your desk is quite, I think, quite damaging. Because I think what you're saying is that you need to come where I'm strong, so that I have a position of power. And part of empathetic leadership is understanding how you impact other people. And that's a massive thing. So like I always look for common ground. It's like you start doing interviews in like coffee shops now, right? Stuff like that. That's the thing that people do, rather than going to the place of work, because there is that power dynamic at the work. And I think stuff like that's really valuable. I think stuff like that sort of change of mindset is really important. And I think that's the next piece on leadership, is understanding situations and how those play into other people's feelings. Because if you're anxious, turning up to a business that's got loads of people in suits when you're maybe a creative person, that's quite terrifying, isn't it? Like, you know, I'm a shorts and t-shirt guy. Like if I had to roll up to a KPMG and wear a suit, I immediately feel terrible.
Yeah.
Like I immediately turn up there and go, I do not fit in here. This is not right for me. I could be the perfect fit, but they'll never know, because I'll never take that chance. And I think part of this leadership piece, and part of the next stage of us understanding how we make people feel, is truly putting ourselves in their shoes, and not just saying, oh, I can empathize with you, I understand where you're coming from, because you don't. What you need to do is actually be that person and think about how you speak to them, how you position yourself, what you do, how that impacts them. And I think that's a massive piece that's coming soon. And with remote working, which is our next topic, that becomes incredibly important.
Definitely, yeah. And it's vice versa, isn't it? It's how we communicate with our leaders. If you know, if we're not in that leadership role, I think that's also key, isn't it, in how we discuss things and how we approach each other. I think that's really important. So yeah, there's just a question there. Not an issue. It's how you manage factors. Okay, so just wondering what you mean there, Paul, because I think it can get imposter syndrome can be quite a big label that we place on ourselves and then carry that label through. So imposter syndrome, you know, it's a lack of belief ultimately, isn't it? So the question I feel is to what do we not believe in ourselves, and how can we start to create that belief? Is it a lack of learning? Is it a lack of skills, or is it a lack of empathy? So, you know, everyone's probably been through it at certain different times of their life for certain different periods of time, and probably called it something else. I think because it's being given a label now, I think there's a lot of people jumping onto it and saying they have this. But ultimately the question is, why is it there and what can we do about it? But I would say that everyone's had a lack of belief at some stage. I know I have at various different levels of where I've been, and there's always things that will creep in, but it's what we do about those. I don't know what your thoughts are, Rich.
I'm interested in Paul's second part of that comment, where he said he wouldn't trust a leader that doesn't have it.
I'm interested in.
I think that's fascinating. I think that's really interesting, Paul. Would you mind expanding on that tiny?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hi, Paul.
I think. How you doing?
All good, mate. All good. Glad to hear you.
You sound like a robot.
Better than your sound, I think.
I like it.
Robot, yeah. It's not working. I'll have to dial into it.
Is that any better?
Yeah, a lot
Yeah.
better.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so yeah, what I would say is, imposter syndrome is just heightened self-awareness sometimes, and knowing your boundaries, your strengths, and your weaknesses. But it's making sure that you can manage your weaknesses so they don't become anything that impacts on your delivery and your ability to become a leader or be a leader. The second part I would say on that is a leader that doesn't acknowledge or admit to have had imposter syndrome at some stage throughout their career probably isn't actually a leader. They're probably a Donald Trump type person who is overconfident and arrogant in their own belief and their own ability. And probably as a leader, one of your core remits is to help people grow around you. Someone that doesn't acknowledge or admit to having to need to grow and develop learning and techniques for that probably isn't going to be the person that's going to help you grow as a person and develop you into a leader.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. The thing for me is sometimes you need that certainty. And just to be clear, I really agree with you. Like someone who doesn't have vulnerabilities, I think doesn't understand people. And if they don't understand you, if you can't understand people, you can't lead them. It's as simple as that for me. That's just one man's opinion. But without that vulnerability, you don't have a relationship. What's interesting is sometimes you crave that certainty, don't you? You crave that confidence that a leader can instill. And we're talking situations, it might be a bit different if you're talking in a work environment where you're saying, I want someone to help me grow to my potential. And you go, yep, that's fine. You know, you can be vulnerable. But, you know, conversely, if I think back to the army, I think, do I want that vulnerability from my staff sergeant when we're just about to go out on, you know, a recce? I don't. I don't want to know that he's not sure. I don't want to know that he's not confident. So there is that situational aspect towards leadership where, and in 99% of cases, I'm with you, Paul, I'm with you 100%. I don't trust that complete lack of leadership. But in those, every so often in that situation, I don't want to think that person's not drenched in self-confidence. And I want to delude myself into thinking that they're infallible, regardless of the fact that we all know that's not true. But there is, yeah, I'm with you in 99% of cases. And Trump's your prime example, isn't it? Do you want the leader of the free world to feel infallible, or would you much rather he was entirely human and understood that people have wants, needs, and problems that are different to his own? I think I know which way I'd lean to this one. But yeah, I like your comment, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you expanded on it really, really well. And vulnerability is critical in the right moment, isn't it? And that it has to be, like you say, situational, and that's very important. But you can gain a hell of a lot of respect by showing your vulnerabilities, because you level down. Even though you may be leading a team, you come down to the level, and then that gains the respect of people ultimately to move forward. You know, because they know you have done a certain thing or gone through a certain scenario. You know, in my content, I talk about vulnerabilities and things that I've struggled with, or various things like that, because it shows that you are a human being. Because everyone can be positive and everyone can talk about all the great things, but what about the moments where you're tired and this negative mindset comes on, or this comes on, or you have this feeling? You know, I've had it a few times recently where I've been doing late night calls in the States, and it ruins me. I'm used to being in bed at 10:30, not going to bed at 1 a.m. and then up at 6. And then the next day I'm really understanding how to manage my mindset. So sharing that with people shows that you are a human being, and you're right, Paul, that vulnerability is key, because it helps us all connect together and move forward as a team together.
I have a question now, though, because we're talking about COVID and stuff, and that's like, do you want that vulnerability in certain times? Like right now, do you want your CEO to say, "Oh, I'm not sure we're going to get through this as a company. I'm up sleepless nights worrying about this," or do you want him to be sure? Do you want them to be sure? Do you want your CEO to tell you that she thinks it's going to be okay, or do you want her to truly be vulnerable with you and say she's worried about losing her business? Like that for me is sometimes, I always talk about situations. I don't work in black and white. I don't work in absolutes, because the continuum changes, doesn't it? And that for me is interesting, because during COVID, I do wonder how many businesses won't make it that could have made it under strong leadership. And I think there's a good chance there'll be a lot of businesses where there's a very, what I refer to as a middle ground approach to leadership, which is where it's very inclusive. We involve everybody. We make sure, and in very consistent times, that's I think the right way to approach like management, leadership, whatever you want to call it at this point in time. But I do wonder sometimes whether task-orientated leadership is critical at uncertain times to bring certainty. And I wonder how many organizations that are profitable will fail because they're too humanistic right now. And it's an interesting thought. It's only a thought, but it's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, is about how to apply leaders aren't one thing or the other, are they? Unless you're like Paul says, unless you're Donald Trump. I doubt he has another side to him. I think there's probably just that one side, and it's a bit of a flaming hillock as far as I'm concerned. But I think a lot of leaders, the best ones, change how they treat people based on the situation and the context, don't they? There's a really good example of this, and it was to do with I think it was General Motors, when they took on like a task-orientated leader to turn the business around, because it was going into the toilet, and the guy came in and like was really task-orientated, told everybody how to do their jobs, how it worked, no consultation, and basically got the company profitable again, but then got fired for being utterly useless as a leader once it was actually performing, because they were too task-driven. So they were this incredible transformational leader at getting them out of the toilet, and then just failed miserably when it came to actually being a good human, and leading the organization to the next level. So there is that part of it, and it just shows you that even the best, you can't be too confident, can you? Because you maybe not be right that time. So I don't know where I'm going with that, to be honest. I just thought it was interesting.
I think it'd be interesting to know what people's thoughts are. If you want to just type in the box whether you would want certainty or uncertainty, if you want to put a C or a U, then it'd be interesting to see how many people would want that from a leader. I think
right now, obviously, we're talking in general.
Yeah. Right now, yeah, it would be really interesting to know what I would want. I'd want somebody to be straight with me, but then provide that level of certainty that we will make it. Be vulnerable, but also provide the certainty. So yeah, lots of C's coming in there.
Well, I understand that, and that would be, yeah, that's interesting. I like honesty and sincerity, but you know what? Sometimes there could be too much honesty, and sometimes you need shielding. I don't tell my son the truth all the time. Do you know what I mean? I'd sometimes tell him what he needs to hear, because sometimes he needs to know that Daddy's got this, even if Daddy doesn't think he has got it. Do you know what I mean?
Because Daddy'll find a way.
Yeah.
So it's interesting what you said before about leaders, leadership and vulnerability. Sorry, apologies everyone, I've got a cold and it's just knocked me for 6 over the last few days. Yeah, vulnerability and leadership. And I was just thinking back when you were talking before it, I was thinking back about I mean, obviously I'm my own leader now. I don't have a leader, but I'm constantly trying to learn and develop. But I'm just thinking back to like years ago and all the leaders that I've had across the years, and I don't think I've ever had a leader that has shown that vulnerability, and I've always really struggled with that, because I'd like to think I'm quite vulnerable as a person, and I do show that from time to time. But I do think that it does really help from that kind of trust and building that kind of, I guess, robust relationship moving forwards. I do think that it is quite lacking amongst leaders. Maybe that's because I've always worked in recruitment and sales, and you know, it can be a bit like that in recruitment and sales. Who knows? I don't know what everyone else's thoughts are.
Sure. Maya's put a really good good thought on there that I really like. So I think, you know, can we actually give certainty? And there is a difference between vulnerability and authenticity. And do you know what? Like, authenticity is like the #1 skill that leaders are desperate for. Like, as in, like, people craving for authenticity. But I think the biggest thing is struggling to be real in every situation, because sometimes you just need to say something that's not true and get through the situation and figure it out later. And you know, I think, Maya, that's really interesting when we say that, you know, can we give certainty? We can certainly give the appearance of certainty, like, you know, in uncertain times, how certain can you be? But I think right now, I almost feel like people could really benefit from a kind lie rather than the whole truth. And I wouldn't normally agree with that, if I'm honest. I'd normally say the complete opposite. I'd say be authentic, be true, you know, be honest. But you know, I'm not saying my way is the right way. I'm just saying sometimes if you say it, it happens. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can create your own reality there sometimes. So while I don't think sometimes you can't necessarily be honest in your certainty and say everything's going to be okay, I do wonder if you can say things are going to be fine, and by the force of will, we will make that possible. I think that's the nearest we can get, Maya, if I'm honest. But I love your question. I think it's a great.
Well, Richard, my comment was more around, it's not, absolutely I agree, you know, leaders should be there to inspire and give hope and support. But also, I personally don't ascribe to, you know, giving that misdirection if it's false, because I think it sets people up for an even bigger fall. I think through authenticity, I'm not saying full disclosure, but what I'm saying is there is a depth to that honesty without maybe full disclosure, because I'm absolutely, you know, aware that certainly at senior levels there are things you can and cannot say. But I don't believe in giving people false hope and misdirection. But you can give people hope in a sense that you still inspire people's trust and confidence without being blinded to the reality of what's actually happening. I don't think anybody now believes everything's going to be okay, because nobody has any idea what tomorrow's going to bring. We've never been in this situation before. So to say, if somebody said to me, I can be certain we'll be here tomorrow, I'd be like, really? That's just my personal view.
I love it. I love to hear that. There's not really much I would say around that. Like, your thoughts very much echo mine. You know, I guess we're talking about the appearance of certainty, because you're right, nothing is certain. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. That was really something I like to hear.
I think I mean, I was just thinking about that then, just listening to that. I mean, personally, I believe everything will be okay. It will be okay. I don't know how great or bad it will be, but I believe within me as a person that I can make sure everything will be okay. What that means is obviously very, very different to other people. But just flicking back onto the certainty and vulnerability and authenticity within a business leader, shall we say, depending on the situation, the question would be, what is the outcome of what I say, and what do I want the outcome to be? Because what we say and our words and our language that we use, that determines how your staff, your team will feel, and that will directly affect how they then perform or act. So what do we want from the situation is probably quite a key question, because if you're showing authenticity, which we should all obviously run by authenticity anyway, but if you're showing your vulnerability and you want your staff to go home and be really, really worried, it depends on the situation, doesn't it? So certainly what you say at any one point in time will be because of a certain question you've asked yourself, which is, what is the outcome of what I'm going to say? Do you want the business to succeed and thrive? And you might need to tell people, we are going to be okay. I don't know when or how, but I know as a team that if we do everything possible, we will give it our best shot. And that kind of language gets everyone together, and it shows that you are willing to move forward, but we're not quite sure how it's going to work.
I'd be interested, Maya, what would you like to hear? Like, what would be And how would you like to hear it? That would interest me.
Yeah, no, I agree with Chris. I do, I think we're all different in terms of our own individual resilience. And I absolutely agree. I personally also very much feel that things will be okay. We don't know how, we don't know what's going to happen, but I know that I'm going to be fine from a personal perspective. But if we're talking about in a work situation, I think that's different from a leader in a work situation. And yes, there has to be carefully managed messages, and I do believe it is about what is the outcome. And it's not about, unnerving people and making them panic. There is something about just acknowledging that fact, is that I think just exactly that was said. We don't know how, yet we're confident we've got enough here to survive this together as a team. Those sort of key messages. But yet if there's something going on in the background where they know that they're planning for mass redundancies, or they're going to have to close their doors, that I don't think that is, for me personally, I don't think those are acceptable mixed messages to give.
I completely agree with you there.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. Like when we're talking about certainty, we're talking about people finding a way to make things work. But if the situation is that it's not going to work, that's completely unacceptable. There's one thing saying it's going to be okay. I'm going to make this okay. But if you know that it's not going to be okay, that is I can't think there's a remotely grey area there. If you know there's going to be redundancies, you need to be clear on redundancies. And then the certainty I expect was, if we make these redundancies, we have the best possible chance of surviving. And that's going to hurt some people, and it's going to hurt me to do it. That's how we're going to make this right. That's the certainty I'm talking about. The alternative going, everyone's going to be fine. No, that's completely unacceptable. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, it's definitely down to the language that you use, and ultimately the authenticity of the message, isn't it? If you're saying one thing and doing another.
And that whole congruence. And let's not forget, change happens every day. Like that is a certainty. Change is a certainty. I think right now is we feel it's even more uncertain because we've never experienced this before. But actually, ultimately, we don't really have control. We just have a perception of it. And I think it's harnessing our psyche and understanding where people are at because of this thing that is so unusual, and being able to work with that psychology. And I think maybe leaders need some help and support in that space to get those messages right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Paul said something very similar as well. The delivery is really important, and it is. And I think a lot of leaders are struggling with how to say what they feel. It's tricky. It's really, I have to say, it's really, really tricky. Interestingly enough, I'm just, how are people feeling right now? Just before we move on to the actual social media piece for the last 15 minutes, how are people feeling right now? Like last time we talked about it, everyone was anxious about going back to work. And then we talked about it the other day, and loads of people are anxious about not going back to work now because they're getting a little bit like, there's other feelings involved at being at home this much, around isolation, around lack of independence, around some other concerns where, when we were doing this a couple of months ago, 3 months ago maybe, everyone's like, yeah, working at home's wicked, everything's great, like this is everything's good. And then now I'm hearing an awful lot more of, we really need to get back to the office, stuff really needs to change. I'd be really keen to hear how you specifically are feeling around that and how that makes you feel. The example I was sharing with Sandra and Chris earlier on was the CEO of Netflix, who was asked about home working and how Twitter and Google have said everyone can work at home for the rest of their lives. As far as we're concerned, everyone, that's great. That's exactly what everyone should be doing. That's how business should be run now. And the CEO of Netflix was like, it just doesn't work as well with people at home. So everyone will be back in the office 12 hours after we have a workable vaccine. And I thought that level of authenticity was quite brave from him. I thought him actually generally going out there and not jumping on this bandwagon of everybody loves being at home, I thought was fascinating. I love the 12 hours after a vaccine, they're back in the office because that's what's best for this business. There was caveats around that. Like there'll be some remote working, obviously, because it's good. There's lots of benefits, but I like that almost massive change in attitudes that I didn't think anyone seen. But we've kind of gone through a weird little revolution around home working, where we've gone, COVID's driven the change, and everyone's working from home, straight into maybe not everyone should work from home. Maybe we should mix it up a little bit. Maybe balance is a good thing. shock of all shocks. But yeah, I mean, I'm really keen to
does anyone, if you want to just put in, have we got like 20 nearly 20 people? You want to just put in if you are working from home or are working from the office? That would be interesting to see what percentage is at home or office. Good.
I'm personally office 99.9% of the time.
Office for a while, haven't you, Mitch?
Yeah, don't have a home.
I personally, so we came back into the office, I think, around August time, maybe a little bit before then. And when we had the big announcement, I mean, we were doing a mix of home working and office working, and some do more of a mix than others, depending on their family life, kids, etc. And I personally, when the recent announcement came out last week, I personally got really anxious about it all, because I was just like, oh my God, I cannot imagine between, from now and the end of the year being at home. I mean, obviously the difference for me is that I had my 5-year-old at home and now he's back at school, which is great. But it's like today, for example, I worked from home for a few hours and I just thought, I might as well go into the office. I prefer it. I like being around people and I didn't want to be on my own. So I think it's creating a whole load of new anxiety about the fear of going back to, kind of similar lockdown times. And in the winter, it's going to be dark when you wake up, dark, you're in your house all day, you're not going out. It's, because obviously you're not going to want to. In the summer, we were lucky we had a great summer, and you could maybe spend an hour or so on your laptop outside or sit outside in the garden and have your lunch. I'm not going to be doing that in November and December.
So how are we going to frame that to a more positive outcome should it happen? Because everyone's basically saying they've got both, that they're on a split and that they like it.
Yeah.
And I'm the same, man. I all my team are on split. All my team are working generally 3 at home, 2 at work, on alternate bubbles, so that we don't cross over too many people, so we limit our chances of people having issues. That's what we're working on, and they love it. Like, my teams love that. But how, like you said, if there is a lockdown, Chris, what's your advice for being happy in the winter?
This is where we need a huge focus on our personal development and self-care. The things the success habits, as I like to call it, the things that work for you on a day-to-day basis, we need to get really savvy with them. If you're doing nothing currently now, you're in a fantastic position, because you could do anything and it will help. But there are so many things that we could all do on a day-to-day basis that ultimately help us to feel a bit better. So, one of mine is, like, I consistently commit to doing 12,000 steps a day. Now, I can see it's raining outside, or it has been, and I'm not that buzzed about going for a walk, but I know I've been sat down a lot today, and I will go out for a walk. It might just be a quick 20-minute walk, but it's finding something that works for you, whether you can do it inside or whether you can do it outside, excuse me, that helps you de-stress, helps manage your day, it helps you motivate yourself, it helps put you in a good place. Because if you are spending more time at home alone or busy, then we need to find things that work for us. And you could do 1,000,001 things, but it's very personal and individual to you. So if you are working from home, is there something you can do to finish the day, close the day out at work? And then before you go downstairs, could you do a little bit of journaling maybe on how the day's gone and where your current emotions are and how you want to live your evening? And you could even plan the next day so that you don't have to think about work until 8, 9 o'clock in the morning when you go to work again, even though you're at home. So it's creating a strategy for work and leisure. I think if we're at home a lot and we're not going out as much, and trying to get out of the house as much as possible, whether it's raining, snowing, or quite windy. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that you might want a little bit of coaching on, but please jump in. But for me, it's really time to ramp up our own self-care, because that's the thing that will get you through.
Pretty good.
And Rich, yeah, what do you? Well, I mean, what do you do that helps you?
Do you know what? I do that framing thing all the time. I reframe the situation.
Yeah.
So like, so Sandra said, oh, it's going to be rubbish because it's going to be cold. I'm going to sit there and I go like, I like the cold.
Yeah.
I hate summer. Summer makes me sweat. So I like the cold. I get to wear loads of jumpers. I get to wear long trousers, whereas I wouldn't normally wear long trousers. So I'm looking forward to being at home because it means I can like snuggle in a little bit, or you don't have to travel to work in the cold.
Exactly.
Love that. Nice one, Sarah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
No more. I hate driving in the snow.
Mm.
Like I'm a bit of a pansy, and like my car's not very good. So I'm not really a massive fan of driving in the snow, and it makes me anxious driving in the snow. So I'm not gonna have to do that probably on snow days. I'm not gonna have to drive on snow days. So you know what? I'm not. In winter, I look out the window from December onwards and see if it's snowing and know whether or not I should be nervous about my commute to work. I'm not going to have to worry about that if the weather's if it's been locked down.
Mornings, the ice is the one that gets to me. Black
Don't we
ice.
see? So we can frame that. There's positives, right? I'm not saying they're monumental, they're massive, and they make up for being locked in 24/7. But there is things I would do to probably frame that conversation differently. I'd sit there and go, well, it's dark on a night, which means I can go to bed earlier. And I like going to bed, so that's
more
wicked.
Sleep.
Yeah, more sleep.
All about reframing the situation. You can see good in everything, or you can see the negative side of it. And as a lot of people are both, ask yourself the question, why do I enjoy both? What are the benefits of me being at home? One for me is having lunch with my fiance, whether we're inside or outside. For 8 years, I've spent 10 or 11 hours, 12 hours a day at work. And, I wouldn't have breakfast at home and would have evening meal at like 8 o'clock. We have lunch together. We have a cup of tea at, I don't know, say 12 o'clock between calls. So it's these little things that we get to do together. Or, I can ring my mum and have a chat whenever I want, but as long as I know I've got my work done and I'm prepared. So doing a list of all the great things that all the benefits of being at home actually has, and I probably guarantee that they'll outweigh some of the negatives that you have. And if you have the ability to do both, then it's a great place to be because you have the best of both worlds. So, trying to focus on the good is really important, and reframe every situation is a great way to coach yourself as well. Paul taking the kids to school.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. Yeah. Like I get to take my kid to nursery every morning now, and I've never been able to do that for 2 years. I get to do that every morning now, and that's a car ride that I never used to get with my son, and we just chat absolute rubbish all the way there and back. Wicked. It's the best part of my day just about. So I'm with you, mate. I think that's exactly right. So that's the framing thing that works for me. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm keen to hear Chris's and Sandra's thoughts on social media's effect on mental health. Remaining.
Well, it's a powerful tool. It is really, for me, it's a powerful tool. However, comparisonitis comes along, and this is where imposter syndrome comes from. I believe Instagram is one of the, I saw something today. People hiring sets to put in their living room to make influencers in LA hiring sets of a plane to put in their living room to pretend they're on a private jet. I mean, if that doesn't help create imposter syndrome, I do not know what. That is the absolute polar opposite of authenticity. It's just complete rubbish. That's not the word I wanted, but anyway. So social media, we need to be really, really careful what we actually take in from it. It's just a programming tool. That is all it is. It's marketing. Same with TV, everything. It is all programming. And if we're not standing guard at the door of our mind, we will fall short of what it's designed to do. And that's programmers in the certain way that the individual brands or companies or people want us to be programmed in that way. So, limiting time on it, limiting what you actually take from it, and, unfollowing people that are really not doing you any good would be the key thing.
Do you know something, from a technological point of view, I think you might find this interesting, but Facebook has an inbuilt algorithm that triggers you as often as it can. So it generally tries to get content that annoys you more often than please you, because it means you're more likely to scroll past it. And the faster you scroll, the more ads you see. That's actually a thing. So
I came off Facebook, I think maybe a couple of years ago, because I was getting so much anxiety around social media, and I just thought, you know what, I'm coming off it. I don't want to see it. And to be fair, you kind of get you on auto mode and you pick your phone up and you're like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And now my go-to is just LinkedIn. And I know there can be some on occasion posts on there where you think, God, this isn't Facebook. Like, but I just get so much more value. And I don't think it's ever really once affected my mental health or given me any anxiety. Best thing I ever did was coming off Facebook.
Yeah, I think enforced breaks are good. I think like my wife, I think takes does a month on month off thing because she finds herself just scrolling and not getting much out of it. The thing is, I think they're a real good force. I think they're a real force for good in a lot of areas. Like it helps me keep in contact with people that I actually genuinely treasure, but don't see that much. And it allows me to keep up with their lives in ways that I want to. You know, we share photos, we invite each other to events, we do stuff that we could easily text, but you just don't. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the positives are massive. The only problem is the downsides are just as bad, aren't they? And
Oh, sorry, I was just going to jump in there. But one thing I've done is turn my notifications off. So I turn every single notification off on Facebook, WhatsApp, Messenger, everything. And I then now make the decision to go in and check messages. Obviously, I use it for work and pleasure, which is a challenge. But turning all your notifications off is really powerful because it means you can actually use your phone without being programmed to look at something. So the red flashing light, the ding, my phone doesn't ring, it doesn't ding, it doesn't do anything anymore. It acts as a tool for me when I want to use it. And when we become unreliant on a ping or something like that, we then start to take control of the scenario, you know, and the brain starts to let go of the dopamine hits that it gets when it gets a ping. And there's a really good talk by Simon Sinek on it, and he's talking about the programming that it does to you by just these notifications coming through at all times. So I have my phone on flight mode a lot on a night, but now I can use it on a morning for things I want to use it to because I won't get messages popping through. And it's a really powerful way to take control of social media. So then you just go in and check whenever you want. So
I think Paul has the same views on social media that I do. But it's now and again, and for stuff I want.
Yes.
Not using the words you said, not validate your existence. I think that's really important because the Instagram lifestyle is painful.
It comes back down to belief, doesn't it? If you're going out in the world for significance and to get somebody to like your post or something like that, then you will need that belief reinforcing to you. And that's why there's so many people with imposter syndrome, because they need external factors to say that they're okay and they're good at what they do. When actually, if we believe from within that we are capable, good, honest people, then a like's just a little bonus, if that's your thing. So it has to come from within: energy, belief, all that kind of thing, confidence. We can't rely on other people, because when it gets taken away, we then get left empty. So it's just a circle that we're on, going backwards.
I think we're just coming to
an end. And it
now.
fell off. I was just going behind it, so it should go back on.
I think that was
I guess we kind of need to call it there, do we? Because we're kind of run the hour again.
Yeah.
Has anyone got any questions for us before we finish? Is there any questions?
Any questions? No.
No questions is good questions. Thank you very much.
So, Chris, can you give us, what's really stuck with me is your positive affirmations. Can you give us some, just as a little finisher, give us some really great PMA quotes that I can...
So I've got my list of incantations that I have in front of me. So one of those is, and I say these running, I say these walking, I say these in the shower, I say these whenever I need to feel good. So one of mine is, I live in total abundance every single day. So a lot of people live in a scarcity mindset. You know, I can't do this, we can't afford that, we haven't got time. So living in abundance, just, you tell yourself, I feel abundant, I feel good, I feel energized. One of them is, I am strong, I am fit, I am healthy, I am wealthy.
That's my shower one.
Yeah,
What we do,
great,
isn't it?
great
That's
one.
shower one, Chris.
If I'm going on a sales call, if I'm going on a coaching call with somebody, I'm absolutely certain in the power of my influence. So I say that over and over and over again, so it's ingrained in me, and I feel powerful. If you're going into a meeting and you need to negotiate with somebody, or you're going into a sales environment, you want to be able to influence that person, because that's what you're going to do. The person who's got more certainty will win the win the agreement or the discussion. Again, another one is my time is extremely valuable and I value it. So I'll say that whilst I'm in the shower 5 minutes before I've got a call, so that I come out of the shower and I'm prepared for a call. Some people may say that's terrible timing, but I see it as I'm utilizing time for me.
Yeah.
So if you say you haven't got time, you will never have time, because you'll always struggle. I just say I've got loads of time and I value it.
Brilliant.
But all of these, everyone, these can be designed to you, and creating your own incantations that you say over and over again that mean something to you are really powerful. Another one, I'm committed to achieving and expecting high standards. Again, if you're going into a meeting with your leaders or your team or something like that, or your family or yourself, it's a great one to fire yourself up.
Very good.
Fantastic. Thank you once again, Chris and Richard. That was amazing. I've absolutely loved the engagement as well. So thank you, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it and you got to take away some useful tools and tips.
Yeah, thanks for making the time, guys. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation with you all there. There was some really good stuff to talk about. So thank you ever so much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you all. See you later.
Brilliant. See you later, guys. Cheers.